I'm just curious. There used to be a restaurant down in downtown Sumner called the Gasthaus or the Gasthaus. It's a little German deli. By any chance, has anyone? It's closed now, but did anyone ever go there? Couple people, right? If you remember that place, don't ask me how this is relevant. I just want to talk about it. If you remember that place, it used to have a dumbwaiter. It was a two-story cafe. They had an upstairs and a downstairs, and my wife and I used to go there all the time. That was kind of our Saturday morning tradition, and we'd order food. She'd get a little chicken schnitzel sandwich. I'd get some bratwurst, and we'd always sit upstairs, and then they'd send it up the dumbwaiter. Then over this old crackly speaker system, they'd read out the name of the order, Eric or Chris or Bob or whatever. So on this particular day, we went in and gave them my name after placing the order, Eric. And they wrote it really fast and really sloppy. I have bad handwriting, but I couldn't even read this. And then we go and we wait upstairs, and after about 10 minutes or so, about the normal length of time, you hear the dumbwaiter going, they're pulling on the rope, and it's taking the food up, and it gets to the top, and the speaker crackles to life, and everyone upstairs is wondering, who it's going to be. And you hear this, Mr. Evil? And everyone's looking around to see just who's strange enough to give that name. What sort of creep is here? No one goes and gets the food. Okay, they wait. They realize after a few minutes that no one's picked up the food, so they go again a little bit more confidently. Mr. Evil, your food is ready. And then suddenly I realize that E-R-I-C, if you're a little sloppy with the R, it can look a little bit like a V. If you separate it, and the C, if it's a little elongated, oh no. So I walk over there, I get the food, and I'm really self-conscious because now everyone's watching. This is the guy that's causing it. But as I walked back, I was in school at the time, and I didn't know I was going to end up studying Theodicy. But as I walked back, I remember looking down over the railing at the order counter down there and thinking, yeah, well, someday it's going to be Dr. Evil. And then strangely enough, I went off and did my PhD in the field of comparative theodicy, which is evil among world religions. And so it kind of came true. So today we're going to talk about a tough topic. We're going to talk about evil, but specifically we're going to approach it from the perspective of, number one, comparative theodicy. Was anyone here in my last topic on symbolism? Okay, sorry, there's going to be a few big words in this one too. Theodicy is one of them. I'll explain it. We're going to talk about comparative theodicy for about the first half. And the second half, we're going to switch out of academic mode and talk about how we can speak with people who are going through evil and suffering in a hopefully attractive, personal way. Because one thing I was dissatisfied with as a student, I remember when I was working on my bachelor's program, I wanted to know the answer to everything in apologetics, and I'm looking into evil and the solutions for evil, and most of what I found was very argumentative, and that's okay. There's truth and there's lies, and it's okay to argue with the people that are filthy liars about things like this. It's okay, but a lot of it was misrepresented. A lot of it wasn't done that well, and there were a lot of the same arguments over and over again, and so when it comes to the systems of evil in the world religions, there's a lot of stuff out there that didn't represent the other religions fairly because they were out to attack them. I get that. They're false religions. You want to tear them down, but you know what? You want to do it with integrity. You want to do it with accuracy, because believe me, there's lots of flaws there you can expose. You don't need to make stuff up to expose the flaws. But there's also a way to present the Christian view empathetically and with sensitivity, with the way to people that might be hurting, or maybe they're questioning about how God deals with evil and why the world appears so evil. It isn't born out of an academic source, but maybe out of a deep personal experience from their childhood that you don't know about. And so when you deal with the problem of evil, it's usually dealt with in these situations in colleges, at lectures, very academically. And yeah, we're going to do that. Doesn't usually go into how to deal with it with an academic foundation, but a personal application. So we're also going to do that. So let's get it started. Comparative theodicy. Theodicy is actually a Greek word that means the justice of God. really what it means in practice is the problem of evil, where it's the doctrine of evil in the church. The reason it comes from justice of God is people wonder how evil can exist when you have a just, divine, all-powerful, all-loving God. And if you've been to any apologetics lectures in the past, you've heard the arguments for that over and over again. I'm not going to revisit those today. There's a ton of good material out there. I think he's in that room now, but that table back there, Dr. Phil Fernandez, is excellent at the academics behind the problem of evil. I mean, really, he's awesome. He has books on it. I highly recommend them. So I'm not going to cover that today. We are going to talk about comparative theodicy, though, which is understanding accurately how all of the major religions define evil, how they talk about how humans experience evil, and ultimately what the solution for evil is. And it's important to start with defining evil because evil means something in general to Christians, but honestly it means something entirely different to a Buddhist. And while a Christian might pray to help overcome evil, and a Buddhist will pray to help overcome evil, they are entirely disparate things at their foundation. Totally different. And I'm sorry, Randy, this is another college class squeezed into about 40 minutes, so we're going to have to go quick. But there's differences. And while things look the same on the surface, there's evil in every religion, people pray in every religion, what's actually taking place underneath the surface, philosophically, scripturally, is drastically different. And frankly, all the systems are generally opposed to each other, as you'd expect. So we're going to talk about comparative theodicy. We're going to discuss the differences here between the religions and the problem of evil. But there's some things to keep in mind because I'm going to equip you with some foundational knowledge today. And yes, I'm going to give you another laminated handout to take home like in the last class. They work great as placemats because you can just wipe them off and eat on them again while reading about evil, because that's what you want to do at supper. But when you're talking with people about the problem of evil, in a situation like this, we're probably going to be pretty academic. On a college campus, in a debate, you're going to be pretty academic. But the thing to remember is that most of our interactions in life are not academic. When someone is suffering, they don't necessarily need to hear the 5 open and shut make your case bullet points that clearly defeat atheistic objections to evil. It's not bad. It's a good thing to know, and you find good ways to work in the truth. But what you're really looking for is that point of connection where you can share the love of God with someone with a solid, true academic foundation based on the Bible. So when you're going to converse with someone from regarding evil, what I don't want you to do is walk away from here today like with the charts I'm going to hand out and be ready to throw that down in front of someone and say, see, this is what you believe, and this is why it's wrong. We're not going to do it quite like that. First, you got to remember when you're ministering to someone who's going through trouble or tough times, or if they're asking you academically, usually they're asking because there's an emotional experience in their background. When they're asking you, you need to identify the system of evil for their professed faith. For example, if they are a Buddhist, you need to be familiar enough with Buddhism. You don't have to know all the scriptures. You don't necessarily have to know the 4 Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path, though that's useful to know. You just have to know generally how they deal with evil in generalities. I'm going to give you some tips on that. You need to make sure they actually believe in it. For example, jumping ahead a little bit, Hinduism, at its root scriptural core, will teach that the experiences of evil are ultimately illusion. That's the philosophical foundation of Hinduism because they don't teach that the self actually exists. Illusion is the fundamental nature of human existence. That's philosophical. That's what the scriptures say. However, I guarantee if you're talking with a Hindu that's been badly burned in a house fire, they're not going to act in correspondence with the scripture. They're going to think that experience of evil they had was very real and very painful, right? And so you have to make sure you validate with people where they are with regard to their religion. Because I can give you all sorts of book knowledge and book reference about what the religions teach about evil, but you always have to validate with the person with whom you're interacting what their actual beliefs are. Even with Christianity, I mean, I could probably pull this room and get into the 4 main questions about evil, and honestly, I'd probably get, different variations of answers from all of you. And so make sure you don't just slap someone with the book or with the notes. Make sure you take the time to get to know them and have them rephrase what they believe about evil before you jump in and slam them with the truth. And then finally, this is my personal opinion. You're getting Dr. Evil's opinion here today. I actually do have a sweatshirt that says Dr. Theodicy on it. It's a total geek joke, but you want to offer the Christian approach to evil as something that's unique and attractive, because it's honestly true. The Christian solution for the problem of evil is highly unique among world religions. As we dive a little bit into other world religions, you'll find a lot of them use the same pattern for defeating evil, different particulars, but their pattern's the same, but not with Christianity. Christianity uses a whole different pattern of religion in order to defeat evil, and I believe it is simply the single most attractive solution to the problem of evil. If I'm not unbiased, but if I was an unbiased adherent seeking which faith I would follow on the basis of this topic, I would be more drawn to the Christian solution properly presented than to any other solution. And so in my opinion, we want to emphasize what's unique. It's not just another religion, and why it's attractive. So today we're going to talk about the 5 major religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. They will be represented on the charts by those 5 symbols next to their name. Buddhism is represented by the Eightfold Path, the 8-pronged steering wheel. Islam by the crescent star, Christianity by the cross, Judaism by the Star of David. I'm a little embarrassed. I have no idea why that represents Hinduism. I just know that's the symbol of Hinduism. I should probably know that. It's just that funky, squiggly thing, but that is the general symbol for Hinduists. When you get deep into the study of world religions specific to theodicy, specific to the system they have for evil, when you dive deep into that and you do deep analysis across the world religions, you find out that there are 4 common questions that every system of evil seeks to answer. They answer them differently, so they're not the same, but the general pattern underlying evil is the same in all of these religions. The first one they ask, is evil real or is it an illusion? Every religion in the world answers this somewhere. And the answers aren't necessarily binary. It's not necessarily a 0 or a 1. Think of it as a continuum with real over here and illusion over here, and each religion is plotted somewhere on that continuum. But that's the first thing systems of evil seek to answer. Does evil, I have an error in my text. I apologize for that. Does evil have a divine or human origin? What is the source of evil in the world? What is the source of the evil that affects humanity? Does it come from the divine, which we're not just talking about God, it could be another supernatural source like evil spirits. Does it come from the divine realm, or is it strictly a product of humanity? Third, when evil occurs in someone's life, is there any benefit for the person who suffers evil to be found? I mean, when I suffer, is there any benefit at all? And if so, where on that sliding scale is it? And then finally, and technically I have to note this question. The proper question is, can evil be conquered? Or is it hopeless? But all religions answer yes. Evil can indeed be conquered. Therefore, it's not a differentiator between religions, so we don't phrase the question like that. Instead, we move on from can it be conquered? Since they all answer yes, we ask, okay, who conquers it? Is the responsibility for conquering evil with the divine, or is it with humanity? These 4 questions, when you study the deep philosophy and scripturalism of every major religion in the world, these 4 questions accurately sum up every system of evil depending on how they answer them. And so now I'm actually, last talk I gave you a handout at the end. This time we'll pass a handout now. I've got some there and Chris has some there. Don't look at it too much during the talk, but it's generally going to be a summation of what we're going to talk about here. And the first thing you'll notice on one page, and technically the first page, you're going to see a pair of charts, and we're going to start diving into those charts next. And then we'll have, and that'll be more the academic side. Then we'll get more into the ministerial side in just a minute after that. When we're talking about systems of evil, it's easy to classify these visually according to Kuhn's theory of scientific principles and some other data display theories. Just display them as a pair of axes charts. First one, you have a chart that is kind of a quick visual reference. I have highly technical scientific names for these plots, but save those for college classes. We'll just look at pictures here today. You see you have the divine origin of evil at the top, and the closer a symbol is plotted toward the top, that means evil has a point of origin with the divine, and the closer the symbol is toward the bottom, that means evil has an origin strictly or nearly strictly with humanity. Similarly, when you go from left to right, on the left you have evil is an illusion, and on the right side you have evil is reality. Now, if this were the college class, we would spend weeks on every single religion going through the deep details of what they believe, why things are defined this way. I'd say it's unfortunate you only have an hour today, but really that'll probably keep you from going to sleep because you'd probably die if I tried to explain all the intricacies of this in detail. So you'll just have to trust or not trust where I've plotted them on the chart. It's okay. Go do your own research, learn for yourself. I have a book coming out in about 3 weeks specific to this topic. It's a college book. It's highly academic. You're welcome when it comes out to grab it and go into the deep details, but it's probably more useful as a sleep aid than anything else. But you can see how these religions are plotted, and what's notable is where Hinduism is. Hinduism goes strongly on the side of illusion and a divine origin. And I don't have the time to go into a deep lecture on Hinduism. Suffice it to say that the fundamental philosophical belief, which is sometimes different from the practical application, but the fundamental philosophical belief of Hinduism is that physical existence is illusion. And therefore, everything you exist in this physical world also has a degree of illusion to it. And that illusion, that maya that emanates out of the Brahman, to use some of their terms, the maya is really what deludes you into thinking that your physical existence and your physical experiences are real and evil is something we experience. That comes from the divine Brahman. That comes from God to an extent. And so Hinduism's kind of off on these questions in kind of its own funny space where evil's not really all that real because the suffering you experience is an illusion because you're an illusion. And it's the divine soul, the divine unitive state that's emanating out this illusion of reality. And so Hinduism's kind of off in a funny place with regard to evil. The other religions, you'll notice, go to the other side of reality. Evil is definitely a reality. And even though a lot of people rightly note that Buddhism and Hinduism are very closely related because they were back when they got started, the thing is that one thing that differentiated Buddhism from Hinduism is Hinduism taught that evil was illusory and suffering was an illusion. Buddhism goes all the way to the other side. The first noble truth of Buddhism is that suffering is real. They took a lot of Hindu thought and immediately said, oh, but wait, we think suffering's real. So you'll notice suddenly Buddhism snaps over to the side of reality, as do all the theistic faiths. All the theistic faiths, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, teach that evil is real. And they all teach differing degrees of the origin of evil, more with humanity than with the divine. Now, you might notice on this chart that Judaism, so closely related to Christianity, is much closer to that middle line of getting closer to the divine origin of evil, while Christianity, so closely related, is way down on the side of human origin for evil, just up a little bit to account for the role of Satan and demons and things like that. Both Judaism and Islam have a doctrine of the good impulse or the evil impulse. This is Talmudic Judaism that developed over the years. And it teaches that God creates impulses containing energy and drive and achievement and sexuality and all sorts of different things that are necessary for human procreation and human survival and human success, but they also contain the drive to do evil as well. And they teach that both of these impulses, the good impulse towards good things, which doesn't have much power and energy behind it, that comes from God, and then the high drive, high energy impulse to do questionable or bad things also comes from God, and that it's the role of the person to use the Torah to learn how to control that evil impulse and channel it towards good deeds. And so Judaism ends up in a particular theological quandary where they're saying, God's actually responsible for giving you this bad impulse. They don't say there's original sin like Christianity says in the fall. Adam fell, it was his fault, original sin, fallen nature. Judaism doesn't teach that. Instead, they teach there's actually an evil impulse that God put inside people that contains the energy for doing things, but also the drive to commit sins or not follow the Torah very well. So they end up in an interesting, difficult place. But that's basically how these kind of roll out. And the other two questions we look at, does the divine conquer evil or does humanity conquer evil? Is there value in experiencing evil or is there no value in experiencing evil? And here you find the two Eastern religions kind of line up really close to one another. Both Hinduism and Buddhism say to slightly different extents that there is no value in the experience of evil. And that's what they teach, there isn't. And the details are complicated. They're in the book if you ever need that. But on the other side, you'll find that the three theistic faiths do teach that there's some value in experiencing evil, just some, not a lot. Judaism might say that experiencing evil is an indicator that you're favored of God, therefore under attack by the enemy, or that you've done enough good deeds to draw the ire of evil spirits. And so it's useful as an indicator that you might be achieving some level of righteousness. And Islam actually adds a little bit more value there. Islam teaches that Allah will send specific trials and tribulations to righteous people as a way for them to prove their worth and earn some merit on the scales of justice, and there's some value there. Christianity teaches that there's the most value out of any of these systems. Not that anyone wants to experience evil, and not that we should pray to experience evil. Far from it. Please don't walk away from here and say, God hit me with evil. Okay? Evil sucks. You don't want to do that. But God does promise, if you follow him, if you're a believer, this is specific to believers, not to all people. If you're a believer, God will bring good out of the trials you face. That does not teach that God is the originator of the trials you face. That's a common conversation among Christians. It's a common mistake to make. Just because God will bring good out of something does not mean his direct intentional will was for you to experience that. Whether or not you believe that probably depends a bit on your view on other things like predestination and various degrees of application of that, and I'm not going to go into that today or ever. It's not my thing. But God does promise to bring some measure of good out of an experience of evil for the believer. Therefore, it has the best value there among world religions. But you know what? Honestly, that's cold comfort. Honestly, to someone that's suffering through finding out their child was abused. Hey, but God's going to bring something good out of that. Well, if you're a believer, yeah, he will, but that doesn't really make the pain any less. That might actually push someone away. So we have to be sensitive in how we present these truths. And again, who conquers evil? Christianity is alone among world religions, even Judaism. Christianity is alone in world religions by saying the responsibility for conquering evil lies with God. Every other religion teaches something different. We'll get into that to varying degrees in a minute. Okay, that's the stuff I had to get out of the way. That's 95% of the college lectures is you just got it in 30 seconds or 30 minutes, whatever. Okay? That's the background. Done with that, let's get to the good stuff. Because I like data, but I'm excited about the message of hope we have as Christians. Because regardless of where things fall on this plot, regardless of the academic discussions we have about the differences between religions, what ultimately matters is why in the world should someone that's sitting there going through a tough time in their life and wondering about God, maybe they're a Christian questioning their faith, maybe they're a non-Christian experiencing something, why should they even consider Christianity as a valid solution for the problem of evil? And it's not going to be based upon the different facts and the different attacks unless you're in an academic college environment. I'm going to do something I hate to do, which makes me a hypocrite. I'm going to use one of these acronyms. Thank you. My wife is mouthing the word to me. We used to have a pastor. We met in church in our high school youth group over in Federal Way, a church that's now called Brook Lake. That's where we met. We were 15 when we met, 17 when we got engaged, 18 when we got married. So, and our background there, we used to have a pastor. His name was Reverend Michael Axton. And he had every stinking service he preached was based on an acronym. Everyone. And then he'd hand you stuff with the bulletin with the letters for the service filled in. You could pretty much guess the whole sermon by guessing what the letters. I hated acronyms after that, but I'm going to break my rule today. I'm going to use an acronym because it works. Christian theodicy does offer hope to a prospective adherent. And here's why we say that. The solution to the system of evil offered in Christianity is unique and attractive for 4 reasons that just happen to spell the word hope. That is a happy coincidence, not a manufactured reality. First of all, the solution is historical, and we'll go through these each one by one. It's historical, it's objective, there's participation, and my favorite, there's exclusivity. Dirty word to a lot of people, but I think it's a word to celebrate. So we'll talk about that. When we're talking with people, again, the approach we should take is you don't necessarily want to say Christianity is historical and objective and you get to participate and it's exclusive, celebrate with me. No, it's yeah, you're hurting, you're going through a rough time. Now let's explain the meaning of these things in a winsome, gentle, attractive way to someone who's suffering. That's what we want to do. So let's talk about historical. By the way, how long do I have? Do I have till like 2:20 or something like that? 2:30? 2:20. All right, so we got about 15 minutes. Historical. 2:30. It's a miracle. It's like the sun stopping overhead and getting some extra life. This is great. Historical. Hey, here's the bottom line. God has already defeated evil. Let me say it again. God has already defeated evil. The defeat of evil took place 2,000 years ago at the cross and the empty tomb. All wars last for a long time. But there's usually decisive battles that, you know what, when that battle's over, the war has been won. It's just going to take some time for the rest of it to trickle out. The battle was won with Jesus. The victory over evil was already completed. You see, our God, he's just so awesome. Our God, the only God, interacts with us in history. God interacts with people in a historical way. You see, Eastern religions deal with a concept of cyclical time, where time repeats itself over and over again, and the deeds of one life are rendered meaningless or changed in value by the deeds of a subsequent life and the deeds of a subsequent life. And things that take place in one particular timeline don't necessarily have lasting significance because they're just overwritten or changed in a subsequent timeline. That's a concept of cyclical time. You can go read like Myth of the Eternal Return by Mircea Eliade or some other people to get a foundation of the basics behind that. But Eastern religions deal with cyclical time. Theistic religions deal with linear time, time that has a start, time that has an end, and every little dot on that timeline that happens is a permanent event in history, and it has significance because it won't be undone. You won't get another go-around on the wheel of life. It happened, it has meaning. That means evil has meaning. That means good has meaning. That means when God interacts in history, it has eternal, permanent meaning. And alone among the religions of the world, God has interacted in history to defeat evil. You see, the promise of Buddhism, the promise of Hinduism, is that someday you'll be enlightened, or someday the world will be enlightened. It depends if you're Theravada or Mahayana on the Buddhist side and the different varieties there. Or with Hinduism, you're going to have these epochs of time that just cycle over and over again for some vague future promise. And eventually people will be released from the cycle of death and rebirth, samsara. They'll eventually get there. But there's no proof of it. I mean, it's just a promise, not rooted in anything historical. And for goodness sakes, there's nothing historical about the whole religion in the first place. Judaism promises a Messiah, and it promises a redemption of the world at some point in the future. But those who reject the Christ, who have rejected Jesus as the Christ, to be more precise about it, they don't have anything historical to base their faith on. They have promises for the defeat of evil. Islam, just the same thing, different details, same pattern. There's a future promise that God will redeem the world and destroy evil. It's going to happen someday. Christianity, God already took that action. God became incarnate in our physical existence, in linear time. You say that to a Muslim, you've committed shirk. You'll be marked as a heretic, sentenced to death. Shirk is the unforgivable sin in Islam. They have a lot of forgivable sins. You'd be surprised how much they can forgive, but not if you commit shirk. You claim that God's incarnate in the timeline, you're an infidel. You get marked with this, Nasara, one who follows the Nazarenes, someone sentenced to death. ISIS has been painting that symbol all over the buildings of Christians throughout the Middle East, right? You don't get to claim that God interacts in history like he did in the Bible in Islam. You don't really get to do it in Judaism. Alone in Christianity, we have a God who took action to defeat evil in our timeline. And we see that with the sacrifice and bodily resurrection of Jesus the Christ. Not spiritual resurrection, but bodily resurrection. The action to defeat evil was physical and in our time, and God's fullness of victory there was physical and in our timeline. This is unique among all world religions. All world religions offer a promise of a future redemption. We do too. We offer a promise of a future heaven, right? But the difference is we have a God that has already won that battle in observable, objective human history, which takes us to objective. The defeat of evil is a concrete, observable fact. It's not a perspective, interpretation, wish, or delusion. And again, these two, historicity is the proper way to say it, but the historical aspect and the objectivity are closely related to each other. So we're going to tread over the same ground just a little bit here. But something that's objective is an observable external fact that multiple people can look at, as opposed to something that's subjective, which is just kind of your own opinion inside your heart. Eastern religion teaches a lot that your own enlightenment, your own path to release from the cycle of death and rebirth is a very subjective thing. In Christianity, we teach that the defeat of evil was a very objective thing. We can point back in history and at least have a conversation with someone about whether or not what we think that meant means what we think it does. You see, no other religion can really point to a point in history and have an objective conversation about it. They have vague prophecies or promises. We have those too, but they're backed by objectivity. So they have no guarantee of the defeat of evil, God's historical act to defeat evil in Christianity is an objective action. It's an objective reality. It's an objective fact. It's not a subjective possibility. Every other religion is a subjective possibility. In Christianity, we want to emphasize, yes, you can have hope for the full culmination of the defeat of evil because it's happened in history and it's an objective fact observed by lots of people. Very unique among world religions. You see that battle over evil, the victory's already won. God has won and he will defeat all evil in the fullness of time. Now, I don't know, of course, I don't know why God didn't just end it there and complete the fullness of victory. Now, I'm alive, my wife's alive, my son is alive because he didn't end it there, so I'm really happy. Maybe quantity matters to God. I don't know. Maybe God's actualized a world where the greatest number of people will possibly come to him. It's a good Molinist view. Maybe that's true. I don't know. I don't know why God has decided to take this long, plus however much longer it is, until he finally completely manifests the impact of his decisive victory over evil. I don't have an answer for that. I only have speculation. I don't think any of us have an answer for that. But we do know that the full elimination of the evil remnant will happen because of the guarantee of historical action and objective history. I could beat that to death and it probably wouldn't get any better, so I'll just move on. Participation. All believers get to share in the fulfillment of God's final victory over evil. You see, every other religion on the face of the earth teaches that humanity is wholly or partially responsible for defeating evil themselves. In Hinduism, you have 4 yogas. That's not the weird posture thing. You have 4 yogas, 4 spiritual truths and paths to enlightenment that you can follow. They can be the path of individual devotion to a specific deity. It can be the path of meditation and awareness, and there's other paths as well. There's 4 paths. Whichever one you choose, according to them, that'll work to overcome evil in your life and free you from its effects. But you ain't getting no help from God or the Brahmin or anything like that. It's completely on you to defeat the evil in your life. There ain't no help coming from nowhere else. Buddhism is similar. While it departs from Hinduism in many aspects, it's still all on you. Buddhism is technically atheistic. It doesn't even know if there's a God. It kind of depends on who you follow. In Tibetan Buddhism, they have all sorts of gods, and in some other areas, they don't have gods. The Buddha wouldn't even comment on whether or not he thought God or gods were real. It's kind of funny in that regard, but the bottom line is you don't get help in achieving your own enlightenment in Buddhism. You follow the Eightfold Path, the 8 right things you think and do and say and intend and all that sort of stuff. You follow that path and you'll eventually get there, but it's all on you. Now, if you're a part of Mahayana Buddhist traditions, you might get some help from a previously enlightened human, but they're not God. In fact, there are several layers below deity. They have really long charts of layers of deity and stuff, and even your enlightened previous souls that help you, they're not divine, they're just human. And so humans are fully responsible for conquering evil in that faith. Absolutely. But in Christianity, we don't have that. In Christianity, again, as we've talked about, God has already defeated evil. You do not have the burden to defeat evil. Now, of course, we want to fight back against evil urges in our life. We want to live godly lives. When it comes to actually defeating evil in the world, defeating demons and fallen watchers and all sorts of bad stuff, that's God's work. He just allows us to participate without the burden of possibly failing. You see, in Judaism, it does teach that God will redeem the world once people have made the world worthy of redemption. There's a trigger point. You do enough good deeds and avoid enough bad deeds collectively around the world, then at some point, we don't know where, again, it's that vague future promise, There's going to be a tipping point, and suddenly the world's good enough and God will take his redemptive act. So God does redeem the world, but only once humans have made it worthy. In Islam, it's very specific. As long as you don't commit shirk, you have a possibility of getting into heaven, getting into the afterlife successfully. But you're going to have your deeds weighed on a scale. And if you got enough good deeds as opposed to bad deeds and you haven't committed shirk like, Trinitarianism or anything like that, which means we're all in trouble, then maybe you can earn your way into heaven, but still the tipping point is your work, the deeds you accumulate. And every other major religion, you're responsible for overcoming evil. In Christianity, that's all God's work. And he's already done the work. All you have to do is be selfless. Give up self-control over your salvation and let God. It's the easiest thing there is, yet it's also the most difficult thing there is, because we have ego and we don't like to surrender control, and Christian salvation requires surrendering of control of your fate, of your worthiness to God. It's easy, it's difficult. But the nice thing is we just get to participate, because once you're a believer, you don't have the pressure of you might fail. You just have the pressure of, hey, God's invited me to the party. I get to set up for literally the greatest celebration the universe will ever see. I get to invite more people to the party. I get to teach them. I get to minister to people in need on behalf of Jesus the Christ. I get to participate in showing God's love. I have nothing to lose but everything to gain, because there's going to be rewards for it. So when it comes to overcoming evil, it's absolutely awesome that the work has been done in objective history, and we just get to participate in how God implements his victory throughout the rest of human time. There's no pressure. Someone that's suffering, what a good message. I don't have the burden for figuring it out, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel that I'm going to get to help out. There's no option more attractive in world religions. And finally, we get to exclusivity. This is my favorite thing. Christianity is an exclusive religion. There is no other name by which men are saved. No one comes to the Father but through Jesus. Jesus alone is the way to heaven. Jesus alone is the defeat of evil. And this gets so much flack from people when you share it with them. I had one guy with whom I worked. As a kid, he grew up in San Diego, and as a kid he had gone to like some VBS classes or occasional Sunday school at a Baptist church down there in La Jolla. And we were talking about church one day, and he said, I hate it that you guys think you're the gatekeepers to heaven. Man, it was this emotional response, and his body tensed up, and I'm sitting in my office chair, and I'm like, whoa, and he's really worked up. So I hate it that you guys determine who goes to heaven and who doesn't. People in our society don't like exclusivity in religion. They want to think that it's all good, choose a path. After all, isn't that what Hinduism teaches? The path of individual devotion, bhakti devotionalism. You choose one of their thousands of deities, you serve him or her or it faithfully. For goodness sakes, they worship a bottle of liquid called soma as a god sometimes. You choose your god, you worship it. It could be that chair, and that's absolutely consistent with Hindu thought. Whatever it is you choose to worship, you just be devoted and you be true, and it'll all work out. So don't come over here and evangelize. Don't tell us about exclusive paths to salvation, because everything works. Yeah, everything works until you read their scripture. You read the Bhagavad Gita, and you have the Lord Krishna talking to the mortal Arjuna, and he says, those without faith in my teaching will not attain me. That's chapter 9, verse 3. Those without faith in my teaching will not attain me, will not attain liberation. Well, what's his teaching? You go forward about 6 verses, and he starts talking about pantheism. Everything exists within me. I permeate the entire universe in my unmanifest self. And he goes on to describe the doctrine that everything is God. You're God, you're God, you're God, the chair is God, the dirt on the floor is God, everything's God. The problem is, in Hinduism, you have to believe in a monistic view of the world, in a pantheistic view that says that none of y'all actually exist. The only thing that truly exists is this kind of strange quagmire of unmanifest reality and divinity, the Brahman. That's the only thing that exists. Y'all are just illusions. Everything just exists in it. The problem is that completely conflicts with all theistic faiths. All the theistic faiths teach that God is real and humans are real, and there's a distinct divide and separation between the two. So if you pursue bhakti devotionalism in Hinduism, as a theist, you're not going to achieve enlightenment. And if as a theist you start believing in a monistic or pantheistic doctrine, guess what? You're not going to be saved. There are certain antithetical truths. And when we're talking about overcoming evil, you have to recognize that the inclusivity offered by other religions is faux inclusivity. It's not real. Hinduism is not inclusive. Their path of bhakti devotionalism is not inclusive. It will toss out, without remorse, any true theist that's in their system. Buddhism, hey, Lama Surya Das says, hey, you can be a Buddhist, you can be a Catholic. He's probably the most famous of Western Tibetan Buddhists in America. And he's big, yeah, you can be a Catholic, you can be a Buddhist, but they run into the same problem. You really can't, because in order to be a good Buddhist and achieve their enlightenment, you have to deny the existence of self. The existence of self is required in Christianity because you have to believe there's a true self that God is saving, and you're not God. It's fake inclusivity. Judaism and Islam both, to some extent, say as long as you don't do these really bad, blasphemous things, if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, yeah, you know what, you might just get in. But probably not. Again, it's this weird, muddled inclusivity, but it's not true. So when we're talking about overcoming evil, we have to recognize that alone among world religions, Christianity offers the most exclusive path to overcoming evil. But this isn't a bad thing. I think this is wonderful. And what I counsel people when they come talk with me about these objections is celebrate it. I worry a little bit sometimes. Go figure, a guy that studies evil worries, right? I worry sometimes. A couple Thanksgivings ago, we went down to the Oregon coast. My mom wanted to get the whole family together. My brother flew in as a surprise from Florida, and we all gathered at this house on the Oregon coast, Lincoln City, just north of town proper there. And I don't think I told my wife this, but we're driving into town. I've got her and I've got our son with us. He was, I think, 7 at the time. We're driving. There's the ocean. Everyone's out looking at the ocean off to our left. I'm looking up to the right because I want to know where to go in case of tsunami. I'm looking at every single street we go by. Is that a dead end? Does that give me enough elevation? Where the traffic likely to go? Because if something bad happens, I want to know where to get my family and where to go to safety. Stresses me out. I live on the Enumclaw Plateau. I know that if we have a massive lahar, there's essentially 4 roads that lead off the plateau. 3 will lead to death. 1 will lead to life. That's why exclusivity is such a wonderful thing to be celebrated. It's not about pushing people down. It's not about trying to be a gatekeeper. It's about the fact that there is so much danger out there in the metaphysical world. There is only one path to escape the tsunami of evil. There's just one. Not because Eric wants there to be one, not because Dr. Fernandez wants there to be one. That's just the truth. In Enumclaw, that lahar comes down, I head north across the bridge. And I'm telling all of my neighbors, you got to go this way. Now, if that lahar's coming down, I have neighbors that just moved in across the street from Minnesota, totally new to the Northwest. Probably might be the first time I've ever actually seen a volcano in real life, and they look up at the mountain. Let's say the top blows and that mud starts flowing down the mountain. It starts coming our way. and they say, you've lived here all your life, where do I go? Pick a path. Just be sincere and devoted in the path that you take. And you drive down into the Ording Valley and you get hit by that path of mud, just how good is your sincere devotion going to do you? You're going to die. If I did that, my response would be pure, unadulterated evil. Telling people to pick a path, they all work. Faux inclusivity is the most evil thing someone can do to a seeker. Because there's authentic, real danger out there. There's authentic evil. And we promote the exclusivity of the Christian defeat of evil because it's the only thing that gets you out of the way of destruction. Nothing else is out there. And so you celebrate it. You say, yes, thank God it's exclusive. I know where to go. I know the path to take to get out of danger. And it's not because I invented it or I have any credit in it. I just happen to know, and I'd like you to go along with me too, because I don't want to see you die either. Exclusivity is something to celebrate when we communicate it, not something to be ashamed of. It's also not something to lord over people. Hey, I have the only way. You don't have anything. You've got a gift from God. You have no ownership in it. But God has gifted it to you, and it's our celebration to be able to share that. So I've just talked through all those bullet points. I think exclusivity is a wonderful gift. We've got about 3 minutes left, so I want to wrap it up with this. When we're talking about the systems of evil, there's really two situations, and I touched on this at the beginning, that we have to talk about this with. One is in academic settings. In academic settings, absolutely, if you're in a college debate, if you're talking with a true academic, fall back on the academics. Understand the systems of evil. Understand what each religion teaches. Understand those charts about illusion and reality and who conquers evil. Emphasize the scriptural aspect of it. Those charts are all based on native scriptures. They're not my opinions. They're what their own scriptures say, deeply dissected. Okay? You just present, here's the system of evil. It's an unbiased system. Those charts, those aren't about promoting Christianity. That's just, hey, when you look at different theodicies and world religions, this is how they compare. Present that to them, deal with the facts, and then as you're able to shift the conversation to have an emotional hook. Right? You can argue facts all day long, and when they go to sleep at night, guess what? They'll still be arguing facts in their head, but if you're able to shift that to the love of God, to some of these more unique and attractive aspects, then that's going to stick with them at night while they're falling to sleep. When you're in non-academic personal conversations, which is 95% of it, first of all, recognize that we're dealing with people who are suffering. Even if they ask you a seemingly innocent question, it's probably based in past suffering or experience. Recognize the opportunity to share, acknowledge the hurt and uncertainty, authentic empathy, and then gently express the principles of hope that we discussed about today. God defeated evil in history. It's an objective fact. You get to participate without responsibility and celebrate the exclusivity. Time's up. Book coming out in about 3 weeks called Systems of Evil. It's highly academic. It's hardcore, so you're welcome to pick it up. That'll go through all the details of the religions. And if you have any questions, you can email me at the school. I'm more than happy to talk with you about any questions you have or any issues you've faced. And time's up. So let's wrap it up. Thanks.